it's a fantastic, I mean, I must say when it began, I was extremely sarcastic and cynical about it, but I grew, I wouldn't say to love it, but to very much appreciate it and see how useful and extraordinary it is, even though it's soulless and two-dimensional.
Yes, and keeping us connected to people, otherwise we'd have a lot of challenges during this time.
Oh, for sure. No, it's keeping things, I mean, it would have been an extremely different period for vast numbers of people without having this kind of possibility, whether it's Zoom or whatever, Facebook, whatever. It's just extraordinary that it sort of kept social networks alive, which is the essence of a city, of course. That's what a city, city is, the machine that stirs things up and
yes,
creates social networks and facilitates their interactions. So I've read, I haven't met you before, but I read a little bit about you and that you're now at Harvard, but that you were, you're Ugandan and worked and was high in administration in cities, particularly in Kampala, I think.
Yes.
And I'm very interested because I've worked a lot in cities and I'm trying to develop, quote, a science of cities. But one of the areas where we had difficulty getting data was indeed Africa. And Africa is the one area I am not very familiar with. Either I've never visited, sub-Saharan Africa, that is, and I'm not familiar with the cities other than a huge amount of reading that I've done about it. I'd be interested in your views of African cities and how they will be dealing with this terrible challenge.
Yes, and maybe just to start on data. In the past, there was a problem with data because a lot of the organizations in many African countries kept their own data in their own silos. But there's been a lot of effort recently to consolidate that data and put it on platforms where different organizations, including cities, are able to access it and use it to support their decision making. And with this pandemic comes a very good opportunity for cities to actually collect more data and structure it in such a way that it will be able to support them in making decisions during, but even more importantly, after the crisis, to manage the different impacts of the crisis. So data that is coming in from the healthcare systems, that is coming in from the relief efforts, that's coming in from basically public health information that is coming out in such big volumes right now. So it's a good opportunity for them to upscale in terms of data collection. And just like all the other cities, I think the cities in the global south are facing huge challenges. And I think for any city administration, any mayor, any leader, this might be the most challenging leadership crisis that they'll ever have to deal with, because it comes with so many fronts, so many facets, such a huge need. And especially because none of us has had the benefit of hindsight. No one has experienced it. We're all learning as we go. And here at the Bloomberg Harvard City Leaders Initiative, we are working to support mayors across the globe to cope with this pandemic, in addition to helping them build their leadership capabilities and help them in crisis management. And we are connecting mayors and other city leaders across different platforms to just have that network of support to enable them to perform. And one of the things that has come out very distinctly, especially for the global south and to a big extent the Western cities at this time, is a conflict of roles between the federal governments, the central governments, and the local governments. And yet the city leaders, the mayors, have a very, very key role. They are the front-facing bodies, they're the front-facing organizations to the citizens, and they make a lot of decisions and do a lot of things that impact on their daily life. So inevitably, the citizens in these cities are looking to the city leaderships to address their needs, address their problems, answer their questions at this time. And with the impacts coming up ahead, it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. So there's going to be a very big demand all around these cities to meet different needs that the citizens will have, whether they are economic, trying to build back economies, trying to build back livelihoods, trying to keep the citizens healthy. These are all areas that cities have to grapple with going forward, and anything that can be done to support the leaders, it would be great, including sharing data, sharing solutions, sharing innovation across board, so that people don't spend scarce resources and time in developing their own solutions where they can. Yeah.
Well, a pandemic, I mean, it's of course, all the things that you said are exaggerated to some extent in Africa, because it's been expanding so fast. It's gone through huge changes in a relatively short period of time. But, some of those bigger issues are ones that any country faces. That is, I'm particularly interested in this kind of tension, if you like, because it's been so extreme in the United States, between the federal government, the national government, and local government. And in an ideal situation, needless to say, these two should work hand in glove. They should be working together and focusing on different things. I mean, the federal government sort of seeing the big picture and doing the integration and connectivity among mayors and administrations, or whatever the units are that are dealing with the local issues, and the city administration dealing with the local issues. And as I was saying to Esther earlier, one of the consequences of a huge discontinuity, which I consider the pandemic to be, in the socioeconomic fabric, this huge change happening in a very short time, is that it accelerates things that were sort of happening. It brings on new things, of course, but things that are already happening, and one obviously being something like this, that more and more interactions are going to take place remotely, and people will be working at home more often, and so on and so forth. But but this whole question of, especially in African cities, as I say, I'm not familiar on the ground with them, but the tension between the huge influx of people and the huge growth, the exponential growth of some of the major cities in Africa, dealing with people that feel disenfranchised, feel left out, can't be easily integrated in. How do you see that playing itself out in Africa? Because that's true in a much smaller scale in the United States, actually, of course, and that's part of the eruption that's going on right now, which has been stimulated by the racist history in the United States, is also, of course, a frustration with some of the bigger issues. I mean, this was the sort of the the element, this murdering of a black man in Minneapolis, was an element that sparked many different things that were interrelated. And so the other question is, one of the things that I've been promoting very strongly is for cities to recognize, city administrations, that everything is interconnected. It's very difficult to deconstruct a city, and many of the problems that cities run into are because, like governments in particular, they deconstruct everything and think that by solving this one local problem, everything else is going to be solved. And so you need to see it in a more holistic way. I'm wondering if that thinking and these kinds of problems are in the consciousness of administrators in Africa.
Very much so, Geoffrey. One of the things you mentioned earlier is the conflict of roles between the central governments and the local governments. Again, taking into consideration the fact that this is a unique situation for everybody. The feedback from a lot of city mayors and administrators is that the central governments have, in most cases, totally taken over the role of managing this crisis at a national level. And that is good for purposes of getting the same message across to all the citizens in a particular country. But it's also very important to involve, engage, constantly communicate with the local governments. Many of the mayors are complaining of a feeling of being left out of the mainstream decision making, and also expressing a lot of confusion in what their roles are supposed to be. And in most cases, the city administrations are mainly just reflecting policies and decisions made at a higher level, and they feel they feel unable to do much, or as much as they want to do for the citizens at this time. And moreover, the citizens are directly approaching the city leaders, the mayors, the city administrators, because of their day-to-day needs. And yet the mayors feel frustrated and left out in a lot of cases. So I think it's very, very important for the governments at both levels to realize this, to realize the importance of each player. The local administrations, the national governments, and also other stakeholders like the health providers, the NGOs, the private sector, all these people that are involved, and even people like businessmen. All these people need to be speaking on a forum and communicating back to back and clearly defining what the role of each one of them is going to be. Otherwise, there will be a lot of duplication. There will also be a lot of pushback on some of the different decisions that would be made, that made it be difficult for the citizens. So the policy makers at both levels need to be coordinating very, very closely. And I think there is need for the central governments, the federal governments, to recognize the importance of strengthening the local governments, the mayors, to respond to this crisis and to equip them, to give them the financial support they need to begin putting in place solutions going forward, help them to strengthen the capabilities of their teams to be able to respond. So it is important that this is recognized, just as much as the local governments need to recognize the specific role of the main governments and the presidents in a lot of cases. And that, I think, would be the best approach to this, because once this first phase has passed, which is passing in many places, there's going to be phase 2, that is recovery.
Yeah.
And it is in the interest of everybody to work towards the best possible recovery initiatives, the best recovery decisions, and the best recovery measures, so that you reduce the negative impact on the citizens. Yeah. The local governments will have to focus on keeping people healthy. They can also have to work on resuscitating economies, but understanding also in the background that because of the impact of this pandemic on businesses and the economy, there's not going to be as much funding, as much resources available to the citizens to make these, available to the cities to make these decisions. Mm. So there's going to be a lot of negotiation, there's going to be a lot of difficult decisions, there's going to be a lot of communication. The city leaders need to be able to communicate to the citizens truthfully, honestly, they need to be credible, but they also need to be able to tell them the truth and yet inspire hope.
I have a message that we're supposed to be moving on. I just got a message from Jonathan to move on. I've enjoyed talking. I mean, this is just the beginning. We've just scratched the surface. And hopefully you can continue. I will listen keenly to the continuation. But I just wanted to add, yes, I agree with everything you said. Of course, not just about Africa. That's globally what I think what you're talking about, really. And that I see the post-pandemic era as being accelerating the role of cities, especially large cities, in determining the future of the planet. Mm-hmm. The future of the planet lies in the cities. Whatever happens on this planet, long-term sustainability is completely determined by what happens in the cities. So with that, let me turn it over